Tansei, good evening. I'm Chris Nachkate. Welcome to APTN National News. Thank you for joining us. Prime Minister Mark Carney and Alberta Premier Danielle Smith made a long-awaited announcement on Thursday by signing an energy pipeline memorandum of understanding in Alberta. Some say the MOU goes too far in putting in place conditions to build an oil pipeline from Alberta to the West Coast. Others say it doesn't go far enough. But as APTN's Fraser Needham reports, the Prime Minister says no pipeline project will go forward without First Nations support.
It was all smiles Thursday morning at a press conference in Calgary for the formal signing of the pipeline MOU between the Prime Minister and Alberta Premier.
At the core of the agreement, of course, is a priority to have a pipeline to Asia. That's going to make Canada stronger, more independent, more resilient, more sustainable.
As part of the MOU, the Government of Alberta commits to advance the development of a bitumen pipeline to Asian markets that offers opportunities for Indigenous co-ownership and other economic benefits, use the Alberta Indigenous Opportunities Corporation to help backstop Indigenous co-ownership of the pipeline, and extend the Alberta Carbon Capture Incentive Program. In return, Canada agrees to not implement the oil and gas emissions cap, immediately suspend the clean electricity regulations in Alberta pending a new carbon pricing agreement, declare the Alberta pipeline as a priority that offers opportunities for Indigenous co-ownership and as a project of national interest that will be referred to the Major Projects Office, use the Indigenous Loan Guarantee Program to backstop Indigenous co-ownership of the pipeline. Later speaking to BC workers, Carney was asked by media about First Nations in the province that oppose an oil pipeline to the coast and had this to say.
There needs to be full partnership, including equity ownership, substantial economic benefits with First Nations in Alberta, First Nations in British Columbia, as well as agreement and substantial economic benefits for the people of British Columbia. So we look at this as the start of a process. We've created some of the necessary conditions for this to happen. But there's a lot more work to do, and very much in the spirit of partnership.
During a question period in the House of Commons, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre said the Prime Minister and Liberal government have no intention of seeing an oil pipeline built.
What he will do is delay it for several years until after a prospective election during which he can dangle a possible pipeline in front of the people, but after which he can hand veto power that is not in the Constitution over to the BC NDP Premier, who will block the thing from ever happening. Isn't it true that this isn't a pipeline? It's a pipe dream.
Well, in a virtual press conference, Green Party leader Elizabeth May said the MOU completely rejects Canada's previous climate policy.
But this is simply unimaginable. This is a betrayal of so many different values, so many different agreements, so many different orders of rights and existing Canadian law. It completely sets the stage for the complete abandonment of Canada's climate policy. It is simply shocking.
Late Thursday afternoon on X, formerly known as Twitter, former Environment Minister Stephen Guilbeault announced he is resigning from Cabinet as a result of the MOU. Fraser Needham, APTN National News, Ottawa.
Now to BC, where reaction has been swift about the news of the MOU being signed in Calgary for the proposed pipeline from Alberta to BC. APTN's Tina House has this story.
A great day for Alberta. It's a great day for Canada. And, at the heart of what is a multifaceted agreement, we have more work to do.
And Premier David Eby would agree there is more work to do. He held a press conference outside of the BC legislature to talk about his thoughts on the MOU.
We need to make sure that this project doesn't become an energy vampire with all of the variables that have yet to be fulfilled. No proponent, no route, no money, no First Nation support, that it cannot draw limited federal resources, limited Indigenous governance resources, limited provincial resources away from the real projects that will employ people, provide the country with money that we desperately need, and provide investment and access to global markets to deepen our trade relationships overseas.
Meanwhile, it was all smiles in Calgary as Prime Minister Carney and Alberta Premier Smith shook hands to make a first step in developing a proposed pipeline project that would bring oil through BC to the coast, then sold to global markets. However, they have failed to involve the First Nations or the BC government in this plan. AFN Regional Chief Terry Chigi says this is like Northern Gateway 2.0.
I think it's a diplomatic and political misstep on our behalf to leave British Columbia, perhaps Premier Eby, but many First Nations that are along the route that will take majority of the risk. It's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when and where will this pipeline breach, but also as with the Hecate Strait, and as we've seen before with tankers such as Exxon Valdez, we've seen other ships run aground in and around this area.
But the position of this government is very clear. The oil tanker ban off the North Coast is the foundation of $1.7 billion in economic activity, thousands of jobs. Today, at the legislature, we have seafood producers who are visiting, people who spend their lives out on the ocean, who depend on the clean waters off our coast to put the seafood on your plate across the country, who are terrified of an oil tanker spill destroying their way of life.
The Alberta government plans on submitting a proposal to build this new pipeline this spring. Tina House, APTN National News, Vancouver.
Mining has long been a key contributor to the economy of Northwest Territories, but what does Indigenous ownership in resource development look like? Our APTN reporter Charlotte Mort Jacobs takes a look at the sector's historic legacy, current challenges, and what's to come from future nation-to-nation building projects.
Mining industry could work in our favor.
Proactive planning, regulatory modernization, and infrastructure investment are just some of the topics being discussed by the Yellowknives Dene First Nation in Detta, Northwest Territories.
The capacity that we've built over the last 25 years is in supporting the resource industry.
With the decline of the diamond industry, Métis and Dene in Treaty 8 and Treaty 11 are entertaining more applications for resource development. And that comes with more workshops on co-management from the Mackenzie Land and Water Review Board, who regulate resource projects by issuing, amending, and enforcing licenses to industry. The board includes Indigenous nominee appointed representatives like Joanne Deneron from Fort Liard.
They have land monitors, they have guardians in most communities.
And YKDFN membership provide feedback.
I travel to all these abandoned mines throughout with my business, and I see the destruction. I see everything that's there.
Mark Cleve Phillips of the Mackenzie Land and Water Review Board says they are seeking community engagement earlier and more continuously when assessing projects.
It's not one thing. It's not just about water. It's not just about caribou. It's not just about community well-being. It's how all of those things are being impacted by these big developments. And these big developments are at the scale where all things are being impacted, and they're being impacted cumulatively with past projects, these legacy projects like Giant Mine, but also the impacts that they're feeling from projects all around the north.
After 23 years, Diavik Diamond Mine, nearly 400 kilometers northeast of Yellowknife, will cease productions in March 2026. It's one of 3 diamond mines, all slated to wind down by 2030. Last year, diamonds were responsible for 16% of the NWT's gross domestic product. Diavik is holding public information sessions across Acacho, Métis, and Cleetcho communities, explaining their closure plans. Divik's closure manager, Gord Stevenson, says more traditional knowledge is being worked into the standard water license renewal.
And we've had many traditional knowledge input sessions, well over 20, with various feedbacks to shape the closure designs and shape the closure plans. And we've actually started executing on some of those and delivering some of those closure plans. And then now when we get into closure, we'll have the feedback loop through the traditional knowledge monitoring program.
With the new federal budget, Indigenous governments are swiftly forming new partnerships. There was a memorandum of understanding signed on November 24th between the Yellowknives Dene and the Cleetcho government to jointly lead the Arctic Economic and Security Corridor, which will include a proposed all-season road to connect the NWT to a port in Grays Bay, Nunavut. Forum panelist Daryl Bolio is a member of the Yellowknives Dene and head of Denendeh Investments Incorporated. He says the 2 unsettled land claims, the Deitcho and the Acacho, are huge stumbling blocks. Both have historically limited royalty sharing in mining projects.
We gotta come to an understanding and an agreement on lands and resources and governance. That's the foundation. So we can move forward together, you know, with that common understanding and that agreement. So that's really gotta happen. Number two, it takes money to develop. The big major infrastructure, the last ones, has been the Snare Hydro, Tallston, and the road to Yellowknife. What stimulated that was mining.
Beaulieu says all governments must work together to create policy certainty and investor confidence for a prosperous NWT. Charlotte Mort-Jacobs, APTN National News, Yellowknife.
Got a story you want to share with us? Here's how you can reach us. Send us an email to news@aptn.ca, and to read and watch our stories, go to aptnnews.ca. You can also find us online on your favorite social media sites, including TikTok, YouTube, LinkedIn, and X. Follow APTN News to join the conversation and see our latest stories. Time for a quick break, but first, here's a sneak peek of what TR Wheatley is working on for Friday's newscast.
Tanse, I'm TR Wheatley here in Norway House Cree Nation in northern Manitoba.
This is specifically about the birthing model that we are in development in the Nanantawewegamick Health Center of Excellence. So this is a second birthing room. It's a natural process, and the system has medicalized birthing for many years, and as a result we've had to go into confinement. We have to leave our community for at least a month. Soon our members will be able to celebrate the birth of their new life into in the community.
Coming up, I'll bring you a story about the new hospital here.
Welcome back. The revelation this week by celebrated author Thomas King that he is not Cherokee has left some people shocked and upset. The admission by the 82-year-old is also not coming as a big surprise for others. For more on this news, our Truth in Politics panel is here for another round. Jennifer Leywitz is the CEO of Pasquale Strategies, and Negon Sinclair is a columnist with the Winnipeg Free Press. Negon and Jennifer, thanks so much for being here. Jennifer, we'll start with you. What were your thoughts when you heard that author Thomas King is in fact not Cherokee or Indigenous at all?
I feel like I wasn't really that surprised, I guess in a sense, because there were already those rumors, and I feel a little weird that maybe those rumors aren't as widely known, but for me, it felt like, didn't we already know this? Like, this has been widely talked about, I guess, in some of our academic circles, because Thomas King was somebody that, you know, when I was going through the SUNTEP program through the University of Saskatchewan, which is a Métis-based Bachelor of Education program, we had to read Thomas King. And so I remember there already being conversations about that. And back then, maybe it was more of a conspiracy rather than a fact. But now that it's kind of coming out, it's more widely known. And I think the impact is being felt collectively now, rather than maybe some of the smaller conversations that were happening in pools of people. So I wasn't necessarily surprised, but I am feeling the same amount of backlash and conversation that everybody else is feeling right now, because it's being talked about everywhere. Facebook, every app I open, it's being talked about in our circles. And I think also the harm that's being caused from this, where, you know, Indigenous people, even writers that maybe saw themselves in pieces of Thomas King, now it's almost like, who do we actually have? And are there going to be more people? You know, we heard about this with Buffy St. Marie, and it seems like more and more people that were the trailblazers or people that kind of, you know, paved some of the way in different spaces are now being outed as not Indigenous at all.
Yeah, when you were talking about, books in university, Inconvenient Indian was all over university. Just about every Indigenous studies class had a reading about Inconvenient Indian. Negon, you wrote a column on this calling it a gut punch. Why does it hit you so hard?
25 books, 3 anthologies, multiple film, radio, TV appearances. Tom King casts an enormous shadow. And of course, Jen's right. We are left at the end going, Okay, well, since we've spent so much time, both Indigenous peoples, but predominantly non-Indigenous peoples, I've actually never had Tom King on any of my syllabi, but we have talked about him when I was a graduate student, when I was an undergraduate student, classes that I took, and then also the fact that he takes up this immense footprint in the literary landscape throughout the country. It almost feels like his shadow is cast on almost every single other Indigenous writer, like legitimate Indigenous author who has looked up, understood, researched. Even in our most complex of identities, all of us take the time to find out where we come from. Even those who are removed in the child welfare system. The big question that people want to know is, where do I come from? Like, what can I know about that family, that community, that clan? And the fact that others had to do this work was tremendously harmful, which is where that gut punch begins to enter into. Because while there was, of course, rumors for years, there was also a lot of trust put in this man, and that this individual said that he had done the research, or at least knew enough to keep representing himself in particular ways over and over and over again, impacting all of us. We trusted that in lots of different ways. And finally, it took a group of people who are very committed. And clearly, it wasn't as hard as perhaps he might have laid it out to be able to find out who he was. It's a gut punch because it's not only the amount of resources that it's been taken to expose this truth, but also now for us all to revisit all of the past 15, 20, 25, 30 years, going back to 1990 and the novel Medicine River, the impact that he's had on all of our lives.
Despite rumors for many years, King says he really did believe he was Cherokee. Do you believe that, Jen?
Do I believe he thought he was? I think there were probably components of him in the initial days that thought maybe he was in some way, especially when you hear the word Cherokee. And I think it's because, Cherokee people have been referenced in so much mainstream media and even like film and things like that in the United States. So it started becoming a very common theme where even people in Canada that really have no ties to Cherokee people would claim that they were part Cherokee. I mean, we heard about it allegedly from the Premier of Alberta as well, and there potentially being some type of Indigenous ancestry there. So I think there was maybe a part of him that thought, okay, maybe somewhere along the line I'm part Cherokee. But I think that it, with the amount of resources he probably would have had, I would like to think that he didn't find out and then kept going. But it's really hard to say because someone of that magnitude would have those resources. And you think when you're that skilled of a writer, you would have been doing some type of research and some type of checks and balances on who it is that you're claiming to be. And especially at his age now, I'm finding it just odd that this is all what he's deciding to address now.
Nigan, 30 seconds. You relayed in your column that this makes it harder for you to trust again. What are the repercussions here?
Yeah, you trust. I mean, it's almost everything's on the table for very legitimate people who are grounded in community and nation, because we are constantly, it's not that we don't ask the question, it's that we now have taken many people on their word and consistently, time and time again, the Canadian publishing landscape, which is really what the question is here. Why is it that Canada keeps giving so much attention to particular authors that have dubious connections and in their books talk a lot, obsess about it almost, about their own identity, whereas the rest of us are speaking about nationhood, stolen land, the impacts of residential schools. Like, we are talking about the issues that are in our communities, but don't seem to be catching the national imagination. And that's really, I think, what the big question is here is how do we move forward after this big, huge gap that's going to be led within Indigenous literature in the Canadian literary landscape. And my hope is that we pay attention to authors who have been there the entire time and the many new voices that are dedicated to grassroots and community and working with people, real life Indigenous peoples that know who they are, where they're coming from, and have done the work necessary so that when they represent themselves, they don't harm.
We'll have to leave it there, but we're going to continue this conversation over on the podcast. Thanks to you both.
Yeah, thanks.
Photo of the day and weather is up next. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Thanks for staying with us. Time now for our photo of the day. An amazing showing last week of the Northern Lights sure filled up our inbox. Susie Morbilly saw the dancing lights high above the area of Nose Creek near Calgary, Alberta. Thanks, Susie, for the picture. Send us your pictures to share at aptn.ca for the chance to be our next photo of the day. Time now for tomorrow's weather forecast. On the East Coast, St. John 7, Halifax 6. Cartwright 1, La Grande River -3. Saguenay 1, Quebec City 0. Peterborough 0, Toronto 3, Northern Ontario. Timmins -6, Wawa -5. Churchill -9, and sunny Thompson -8. Princess Harbour -6, Gimli -4. Saskatoon -6, Regina -2. -15 in Stony Rapids and clear skies, Buffalo Narrows -10. Grand Prairie -9, Fort McMurray -10. Edmonton -7, Calgary -7. 0 in Penticton, Campbell River 5. Dease Lake -8, Smithers -3. Beaver Creek -19, -21 in Mayo. Yellowknife -15, -16 in Trout Lake. -26 in Fort McPherson, Colville Lake, same temperature. Baker Lake -23, Chesterfield -17. And Arctic Bay -29, Aglulik -25. Looks like winter's here up north. It's Thursday, and that means our Nation to Nation host, Karen Pugliese, to tell us why she's once again having Senator Paul Prosper on this evening's episode.
On Nation to Nation tonight, we're taking a look at what's been happening with Bill S2. And friends, holy, it's been a lot. This bill was originally meant to resolve a very specific legal dispute for a small group of people who lost their status. But the Senate committee then heard from dozens of witnesses pushing for even bigger changes to end the second generation cutoff. And they did that. But the Minister of Indigenous Services is not happy. She says the Senate skipped consultation protocols. And she calls what they did racism itself. We'll explain what the Senate did to this bill and if it's going to all get undone. That's coming up on Nation to Nation after the news.
And that new Nation to Nation episode is coming up next in about a minute's time. That's all the time we have for this Thursday, November 27th. Please join us again for APTN National News Daytime tomorrow. Thank you for watching. We'll see you again next day.